Hey Nerferders, I'm Addy Thomas.
And I am Ben Milton.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of Certain Point of View. We're diving into the Star Wars galaxy. This week we're sticking with comics, and we're catching up on past comics. Well, this one we actually are catching up on a comic series, miniseries that just ended. We're going to talk about the Thrawn comic miniseries, which is a loose adaptation of the new Timothy Zahn Thrawn novel. So the guy who originally created Thrawn decided to write a novel of him in the new canon, and we've got a 6-issue comic miniseries about his rise to power and some events leading right into his appearance in the Rebels. We're going to talk about that in just a second, but I want to remind you can go to our website. If you want to talk to us, interact with us on all of our social media, we've got it on our website, certainpov.com. You can check that out there, along with all of our other podcasts. Again, that's on our website, certainpov.com. All right, so Thrawn. Ben, what are your initial thoughts on this series?
This did a great job of reintroducing the character and reestablishing who he is and giving him some mystery and some menace, but also like an Achilles heel too. And just like laying out who he is and the people around him too, and how he becomes a Grand Admiral in such a quick time. It's for 6 episodes, for a 6-episode miniseries, like it's surprisingly dense and covers a lot of territory quickly. I thought it was amazingly well written. Like, it starts off what I felt was a little bit slow, but also looking back, recognize like
it's very necessary.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not wasted. It's not slow for slow's sake. It's just establishing everything that's happening because it covers a lot of territory. I loved the artwork. I thought the artwork was really, really cool. Especially when you first meet Thrawn and he has the long hair.
Yes.
Just what a badass he is. Like,
right.
There's just a lot that I like about. I like they do a good. This is the best job I think I've seen of like the Empire political intrigue in the military executed, and how like you see like all the different people like vying for power and stuff like that inside the Empire, which the only other place that I can really think of where they executed that as well is in Star Wars: The Old Republic MMO game. You get a really good feeling of what that's like and how that all works out. I loved it. I thought it was an incredible 6-episode miniseries, and if you're a Thrawn fan, I can't recommend it enough. And if you're not a Thrawn fan, I recommend it just so you have a better appreciation of who that character is.
Yeah, absolutely. It is amazing. I really want to read the novel now after that. And I'm excited. You know, it took me a little while to get into it, but I think there were definitely a lot of fascinating moments in those first 2 issues, but the 3rd issue is where I really got into it, which is funny because that issue is actually not really about Thrawn, but it's about Arlinda Price, the governor of Lothal, who you see in Star Wars Rebels. But it established her as a very fascinating character too.
Right.
A side character, but very interesting nonetheless. And I was amazed at the depth of exactly what you're talking about, sort of the political machinery of the Empire. I also liked how they gave her, like, I surprisingly felt sympathetic to Thrawn and Price in this series, and that was like, after watching Rebels and after knowing Thrawn from the original books, like that's an amazing thing to be able to do. I think they did an amazing job. One, by actually not choosing to make him the main, like, your viewpoint character, which they could have done, and they could have made it interesting, but I think what would have happened is some things would have been too cold, and it would have taken away the air of mystery. Which is funny because with Vader, they've done, like, Vader is your viewpoint character, but the thing that works with Vader is because we already know about him as Anakin, a lot of that mystery is already gone. So now it's a matter of filling in how is he reacting to, how is he working within this new power structure and dynamic, what is left of him and how is he pushing that away. So because that mystery is gone, they're instead able to spell things out, and you're able to take his perspective instead and explore that character in a very interesting and meaningful way. Whereas Thrawn, because there's so much more mystery to this character, even to his true motivations, by
episode 6, you're like, wait, what?
Right?
This is not at all what I thought was happening.
Exactly. I mean, but its implications for the bigger Star Wars universe are amazing. But to back it up, though, it helps that his ensign is your viewpoint. You have him and this ensign essentially is outcasts. So they're automatically underdogs in this power structure, so you're rooting for them. Arlinda Price is someone who is actually hurt by the governor and the political structure on Lothal, someone who's actually a hero in Rebels. He's someone you root for in Rebels, but he's straight up a bad guy. Even though you never see him on, in a panel or on screen, essentially his power structure is pretty messed up. Yep. And he does some pretty terrible things to her family that kind of push her into this path in life that leads to her rising within the ranks of the Empire, which I think is such interesting commentary on the nature of people, as far as balancing your perceived needs and what you're willing to do to meet those needs or wants or whatever. So, Ben, you see?
Yeah, I have. It's funny, as I was reading that and I finished it up, like I flashed back to her end in Rebels, and it suddenly took on like a very tragic, bittersweet moment for me of
exactly.
Like, oh, that is sad. Like
there's an odd nobility in it.
Yeah,
in her accepting her end, her
fate. Yeah, and kind of coming to terms with it, but also at the understand, like you now understand, like, oh well, like she had legitimate beef, like she had almost, you can honestly say she had good intentions.
Yeah,
and she chose the wrong side, and she chose the wrong methodology, obviously. And I mean, she was fairly despicable, but along that path, you can see like she didn't start that way. Like she's pretty likable and just kind of like ends up falling into this situation, unfortunately, and making the worst of it.
Especially once she starts playing in the politics of Coruscant, which she does at first for good reasons, but then especially when people that she perceives as friends betray her, is when she kind of finally makes that turn.
Yeah.
So so you see just how cutthroat the politics of Coruscant are, which I think is fascinating. I think you could do an amazing series, like a political, like a West Wing series on Coruscant.
Oh, I was because it played more like Dynasty for me.
It did. Well, imagine evil West Wing though with Palpatine.
I'd be in. I'd watch that.
I'd definitely watch that. But I mean, but again,
or you could just turn on Fox News.
Shots fired. Be careful.
Or CNN or MSNBC, and it doesn't matter what your political leaning is.
Yeah,
disclaimer.
Either way, it doesn't. Be careful of taking shots right now, because you might get fired from whatever job for tweets you made 10
right?
years ago.
It's a good thing I'm self-employed. Jesus Christ! Everybody needs to calm down.
Right. So, but yeah, back to Thrawn. Let's actually at this point let's go ahead and go spoiler.
Okay.
Go with spoilers. I think at this point, it's been fairly spoiler free. You have enough to figure out whether or not you want to be read this series, but it's definitely well worth the read. Let's get a little bit into some more detail here. So, I was a little underwhelmed by the story by Nightspawn. Nightspawn was the smuggler / rebel until the payoff at the end. Like, I didn't care so much about the Tabana gas, but I couldn't read this without hearing Lars Mikkelsen's voice from Rebels in my head reading Thrawn. He such a great voice for Thrawn, and just totally possesses the way you see that character. But it surprisingly, even though he very clearly plays a villain, the amount of pathos for Thrawn is incredible. I love seeing that he tries to go in minimizing casualties as much as possible and giving the potential for rebuilding something. But he is so coldly efficient. Even with that tendency, he does stuff that screws up people. Like when he decides to destroy the drug plant on that planet that destroys their crops, like
the spice,
that's like a real, like, that's a super conflicted moment. Like, I'm just like, I don't.
Not though. He was right, because if he had left it there, as soon as
they
he
would
left,
have still had
the smugglers would have come back and they would have killed all of those people.
Yeah, but you're a bit more of the pragmatist than I am, and I'm more the idealist.
He's absolutely right. Now,
so you have more chance of being a Thrawn than I do.
He's not wrong in a lot of this stuff where you're going through his reasoning. You're like, his reasoning is absolutely correct. Like, and I agree with you. Like, the fact that he does go so far out of his way to eliminate suffering and to eliminate needless body counts makes him such an interesting and you're right, he's completely cold and logical, but it's also a very compassionate thing to do.
Yeah.
You know, and he's like,
in a very odd way, yeah.
Yeah, he's like, if I don't blow this up, you're dead tomorrow. Like, I'm sorry that your crop is ruined, but you can regrow a crop. You're not going to die tomorrow if you don't have this crop. Whereas if you do have this crop and I just fly away and leave you to your own devices, you're dead tomorrow.
Right.
Like, his compassion in that of like, there's no reason for these people to die is something that you don't really see from the Empire very often. The Empire is painted in very broad, general evil strokes of like, we just blow up planets for the shits and giggles of it. Like, who cares? Like, we're not. Whereas he's like, no, this farmer doesn't deserve to die. I'm not going to kill this farmer. Yeah. Like, what good does that do? He brings much needed humanity to the Empire, frankly. Again, the Empire is painted in such broad evil strokes. It's like, it's hard to imagine that anybody with any kind of reason would sign up to be in the Empire. Like, and when you see it from the perspective of Luke and Leia and every, our heroes in this story, you go, God, like, the Empire is obviously evil. Like, why would anybody be interested in this? Right. And he brings some compassion and some warmth and some reason to that institution, which, frankly, I think they need more of that, honestly. Like, yes, the Empire can be evil, but everybody can't be Palpatine and Tarkin and Vader. Like, everybody that we meet in the Empire is a goddamn monster, and that just doesn't make sense ultimately.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
well, I think that's one thing.
Good.
Like, Yularen has, in some ways, another character who figures fairly largely in this series, who is another character that we see in Rebels, but is the main admiral that actually works with Anakin throughout the course of the Clone Wars. He's a character that's painted with a little bit more sympathy, but he's the head of the ISB, basically internal affairs, and the spy and interrogation unit of the Empire. He has a much bigger role in this story as well, because he kind of helps. He becomes an ally of Thrawn's to help him navigate some of the politics a little bit, because Thrawn has this meteoric rise from basically being this Chiss outcast, at least that's the way it's perceived, that Palpatine takes interest in, because he's from the unknown regions, and we get a little bit of hints of, well, we know that Palpatine is very interested in the unknown regions, and which is why he's invested in Thrawn and makes him an officer pretty much right away. So it's super fascinating to see this rise and to see.
Well, what's interesting is how he does that, because he brokers knowledge. Right? Yes. Like he says, I'm an outcast. He presents himself as an outcast of the Chiss Society, and he says, I'm from a region of space you don't know hardly anything at all about. And here's the important part that I took away from it. There are really bad things out there, and they're coming.
Absolutely. Which I find fascinating.
I was totally hooked on that, and it doesn't pay off at all in this series, which is totally fine. Which is fine. But man, I want to know.
Yeah, because it's one thing though. They've been planting that in Disney Star Wars for a while, because they hint at that, like that Palpatine sends out this expedition. I think my Snoke theories revolved around that Snoke was what they were looking for, that he was from the unknown regions.
Right.
It seems like at this point that's a no-go, and I'm totally fine with that. But man, I am still fascinated to see whatever this threat is. That, I mean, do we maybe like I guess it doesn't matter ultimately if we find out if that's something that shows up in episode 9 or not.
Yeah, I hope it opens
maybe
the door
set off
to
a new set of stories. Instead of
and that's where Rian Johnson is going with his new trilogy. Like that would be awesome. Like we finally like get some like hints of like, oh yeah, hey, this thing is coming from the outer reaches, the way beyond where we know, and that's where we end up going. That would be awesome. I would totally be into that, and bring in the Chiss ascendancy,
yes.
Which would be super cool to have as part of that. It's time. It's time to get out of this sector and explore some new areas of Star Wars.
Yeah.
I'm totally in. They've laid enough groundwork. They've given enough hints throughout all different types of media that it's time to go there now, for sure.
Absolutely. Definitely big reveals. We were talking about what's out in, the big thing that motivates him is this fear of whatever threat there is beyond the Outer Rim, beyond wild space, beyond all of that. And he is actively working for the Chiss ascendancy,
yep.
And he's
a super spy.
Right, and we find out that ultimately he wants to make sure that the Empire is not a threat to the Chiss, and if they're not a threat, that he can make them a formidable ally against whatever this threat is.
Did you note, like, the thing that I took away from that too is like he is not at all impressed by the Death Star. In fact, he's like, this is
it's a bad idea. Yeah.
This is dumb. Like, this is not what you need to fight what's coming.
Yeah, I love that.
You need a really agile, powerful Navy, is I think what he says.
Well, his tactical assessment of it is very interesting, because he just says basically it focuses you in on one location, and you need the flexibility of the Imperial Navy instead. I mean, we've seen him on Rebels execute some very fascinating strategies, and we see him do it here. As well. In fact, the reputation he gains, which is very interesting, because going into Rebels, you hear that he's like scoured the earth of the not just the insurgents, but the civilians as well. But that wasn't his intention. Is what's funny. It's sort of a side effect of Price trying to save the people close to her. You know?
And she ends up killing half of the planet,
Right, so you end up carrying on that reputation.
And he knows it, which is what's great.
Right.
He benefits from that reputation, or is hindered by it, but is also like kind of like held in check by her, because he does need her.
Exactly. So it's sort of a fascinating dynamic right there. But it's also really cool seeing how he does try to broker peace on Bataan and try to find a way for them. Like he with every intention, he tries to go in a way, handle it in a way where they will be able to just turn over their weapons and nobody has to die for it. But even when he has to fight, like the way he executes his plan, like knowing that that his opponent isn't going to attack him in a helpless formation, and the way he's already prepared for that and sets a trap for them. I mean, he's such a great character. He's such a great villain. He is very quickly rising as far as the quality of a villain in not just in Star Wars but in fiction. Period. He's really up on he reminds me a lot of, especially after this comic series, he reminds me a lot of Sinestro.
Yeah, there's a little bit of Sinestro in him, and there's also a little bit of like Hannibal Lecter in him as well.
Yes, for sure.
Where he has sort of the cold, uncaring feeling of like and pragmatism of Sinestro, but he also has the manipulation of using his knowledge and brain of Hannibal Lecter.
Yeah.
He is a fascinating villain. I really like what they're doing with him, and how they humanized him and made him a sympathetic character where you're like, oh gosh, like I kind of like this guy, you know, because in Rebels you don't really get the opportunity to like him in Rebels. He's just, you know, he's the bad guy, and you know,
right.
they're
he's
constantly trying to stay ahead of him.
Yeah, he's very knowledgeable of everyone, but they almost paint him as being a little disrespectful of everyone's customs, the way he collects, you know, the like Harris Kalikori and all, you know, various other artifacts, essentially, and the way he kind of manipulates and navigates through navigates his plans and all. So,
and you didn't get that with this. Like here, he's far more curious and respectful.
Yes.
Especially with the ensign that is assigned to him, and how he relates to him, and is like, no, I misspoke. I didn't mean to cause insult. Like I'm curious about what you think, and that kind of thing. And you didn't quite get that out of the Rebels version, but they could also chalk that up to, you know, he's a little more mature, a little more comfortable in his manipulations at this point, in his position within the Empire at that point too. So
yeah, absolutely. I mean, and the fact is, he goes out of his way to make sure he gets promoted as well. So, you know, that's also right. You know, so you give more, like you actually get a little bit more endeared to Thrawn as a character, which is such a weird thing to say, you know.
Well, yeah, especially in Star Wars, because we're not used to getting that out of the Empire. We're used to getting like just despicable villains, like where it's easy to be like, oh, well, that's the villain. Like Tarkin doesn't have a good side. Like there's no redeeming qualities that we know of Tarkin.
Right.
You know,
right.
Even in Clone Wars, he's a dick. Right?
Yeah,
like,
for sure.
You're just like, oh, this guy, he's only getting worse. Like, you know, so by the time he starts blowing up planets with the Death Star, you're just like, yeah, that's what he does.
Yep. And he's a bad guy.
Yeah. And Vader.
He's so tied to the Death Star pretty much immediately.
Yeah.
Because, you know, if I remember, I think he is holding the plans already for the Death Star. He's escorting the plans for the Death Star in that episode of Clone Wars. You know, and we know that's the pet project for him throughout the series. Pretty much every time we've ever seen Tarkin. So you know, it may be worth. But even with Vader, like I mean, like you have Anakin, but Anakin's not even really that likable. Like he's such a whiny douchebag. I would say Clone Wars does change that. It does help. Yes, it does. It helps significantly. A lot, but he is actually really likable in Clone Wars, if you ask me. Okay. You don't agree on that? I wouldn't call him really. Obi-Wan is really likable. Ahsoka is really likable. Yeah. Anakin is sympathetic. Yeah, he's sympathetic. I don't like Anakin. I don't really like Anakin. Yeah, he, you know, for all the faults that he's criticized for are legitimate. Like he's impetuous and foolish and does a lot of dumb things, but he's so good that he gets away with it. Whereas if a lesser skilled Jedi were to try that stuff, like it would fail miserably. Like he has sort of like he has. I kind of want to know who your lesser skilled Jedi are. Is it are you picking beef with Addy Mundi?
I mean, that penis-headed dork definitely couldn't pull it off. Like, there's no chance. Like, Kitty Monday isn't going to get it done. Plo Koon isn't going to be able to pull that stuff off.
Plo Koon is established pretty well in that Clone Wars series. It's pretty
He
formidable.
is, but he can't do Anakin-level stuff. He's not going to pull that off.
That's fair, yeah.
That's
fair.
Nobody else has that high of a midichlorian count, so it just can't be done.
Anakin is an interesting one to explore. I do think it makes him likable. Because I rewatched the scene where he and Ahsoka split, where Ahsoka leaves the Order, and man, that scene is so heartbreaking.
Yeah, but is that because Ahsoka or is that because Anakin?
I felt both. I felt like I wanted Anakin to leave the Order as well in that moment. Like, if he had chosen to leave the Order, you think about like the pain and suffering.
What could have happened?
Yeah. You know, because he says it right there that he wants to leave, that because he's a person who, yes, it's not that love is a bad thing, but his obsession with love is, and his unwillingness to, he wants to have two things that he can't have at once, and it's being the badass Jedi but also Padme, and he's got to let go of one or the other in that situation, and that ends up hurting him and the galaxy at large. I feel you're right. Sympathetic is for sure. Likeable is an interesting one. I think that depends on each of us individually. I do find him likable though in Clone Wars, because that makes the tragedy of the fall that much more heartbreaking because of Clone Wars. Yes, Hayden, and don't get me wrong, Hayden Christensen didn't do any of that for me. You know,
I like. I've softened. I like Hayden's performance. It is what it is.
I'm not hating on Hayden because it's Hayden. I think there's a lot that
I think he was fed some garbage dialogue by George.
Exactly. I think Matt Lanter on the Clone Wars animated series got much better dialogue, much better character work. So
for sure.
I do think it comes down to that. But that being said, when I watch Hayden Christensen in Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith, I have a hard time feeling a whole lot for him.
Yeah, I don't. I mean, they definitely worked hard to give you a reason to feel bad about Anakin and to try and. But to me, Clone Wars ended up making me more interested in the people around Anakin,
for sure,
than it did about Anakin himself.
Yeah.
And you're right. Like, Anakin's fall is his inability to let go, and his he can't, like you said, he can't commit to the Jedi, and he can't let go of the Jedi, and the same with Padme.
Yeah.
It's more sympathetic. He's still not likable. For me, he's not likable because of that. Like, his inability, like his indecisiveness and his inability and his whininess of like, I want my cake and I want to eat it too.
Here's the thing though. I think because we don't have scenes of him whining the way he did in Clones and Revenge of the Sith in Clone Wars, and here's the thing, the chemistry and even the arguments he has with Padme makes that relationship feel a lot more real in the Clone Wars
and mature.
Yeah, so like it wasn't just this like weird like, it felt like a high school crush in Clones.
It's very much presented in the movies as a high school crush and a really inappropriate relationship.
Right.
That's done for all the wrong reasons.
Whereas you can see them as a team work together in Clone Wars, and they are effective. Like, you see, like, Padme has some badass moments. Anakin does too, and even like the hidden sort of their forbidden love story works really well in the Clone Wars series because of that and how they're kind of handling themselves. Like, he feels, yes, he's reckless, but he feels far more professional. Like, it makes sense that he held a job as a Jedi. in the Clone Wars series.
It also makes sense that Mace didn't give him the rank of master.
Actually, I disagree with that. Screw Mace.
I completely agree with Mace on that one. Anakin is a goddamn nightmare. He's like having Riggs from Lethal Weapon with a laser
you need that
sword.
yin and yang, man, and even at workplace.
No. You actually don't.
You're not a rule follower at work, Ben.
I'm
know
not,
that.
and I've been fired from a lot of jobs, man.
But didn't
And
you
very
believe
rarely-
that you were a good asset to the team?
Oh, I believed it. Nobody else around me did.
Well,
I believed it.
Yeah. That being said, despite all of that, you're very similar to Thrawn in that you weren't great with the politics of the situation.
No, not at all. Not at all. But
effective.
I'm very effective and super pragmatic, and I really don't give a shit about your feelings.
Although Thrawn cares a little bit more about people's feelings.
He probably does. He probably does. I'm a little more. I'm almost autistic in my workplace behavior in a lot of ways as we go back and analyze it. It's not good.
And that I think that's gonna wrap it up for our episode of understanding.
For all the
ourselves
people
through
that
Star Wars.
for all the people that I've worked with, I'm so sorry. My bad.
Sometimes you gotta look out for your ascendancy, man. So.
That's really where I belong, man. That seems like my group of people right there.
Well, you can let us know what you think of the Thrawn series. Definitely check out the series. It's only 6 issues, totally worth it. It just wrapped up a couple weeks ago. The last issue came out, and it is some great comics material, and it's a great Star Wars story to check out. And to kind of get a better picture of the politics of the Empire and a truly fascinating and fearsome character within the Star Wars galaxy. You can find all our social media on our website, certainpov.com. And while you're there, be sure to check out Patreon. If you enjoy what we do and want to be a part of it, you can do that through Patreon. You can go to our website, certainpov.com, and check it out all there. Until next time, though, stay scruffy, my nerf herders.